Well, we are live, and we want to say thank you to everybody that's joining us here on the Altar Live show. We have a very special episode here for you today. I'm Andy, of course. I'm not joined by Maeve over on the corner there. You can see with the little name tag, I am joined by the one and only Mr. Alan White. Alan, thank you so much for being here on the Altar Live show today.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Alan has a long history with church consulting and kind of the digital, or really the group thing that's been happening at church. But before we get there, Alan, let's kind of let the Altar Live family know a little bit about you. Who are you? Where do you live? Kind of your background a little bit.
Yeah, so I've been a pastor for 31 years, and my wife and I have been married, will be 22 years in April. We have 4 kids ranging from 8 to 20, and I'm a young 57. So what's interesting is I grew up in Northeast Kansas.
Okay.
And then I went to school in Missouri. I served a church in Northern California. I joined a national ministry, ended up in Orange County, then moved across the country to South Carolina where I served a church. And now after 38 years, my family and I last summer moved back to where I grew up.
Wow.
Northeast Kansas. So we have come literally full circle. So so it's kind of wild and it's kind of weird being back, but it's nice being back too.
Sure. What made you move back?
You know, the church that I was serving in South Carolina, I left about 10 years ago. And so we really didn't have a reason to live in South Carolina other than I enjoyed living in South Carolina. But the work that I started doing, consulting with pastors and churches, I could work with anybody anywhere. I just needed a cell phone, an internet connection, and an airport. I'm good. Okay. And it was funny because when we were, applying for a mortgage and all of that to buy a house here, I had to write a letter to the mortgage company explaining how I could continue my business if I wasn't in South Carolina. And I had to explain to them, I literally had not worked with a church in South Carolina for years. Now, I am working with one now. But anyway, so I could do my business, from anywhere. I wasn't going to get, fired since, I'm the only employee. So there you go.
I love that. That's fantastic. Okay, so you talked about your organization. All you need is an airport and an internet connection. What is your organization? What are you doing right now?
Yeah, so officially it's Alan White Consulting. It's not that I'm a narcissist. It's just that I named it after myself. It's just that I'm not very creative. But I work with churches in a variety of ways. I do individual consulting with churches to help them grow their small groups, to help them make more disciples. And some of that, we've been doing online the last few years. And then in addition to that, I do coaching groups with groups of churches. We work through as a cohort. I am a writer. I write books. I write curriculum. I produce video-based curriculum. I do all kinds of stuff.
Okay, so let's talk about groups, because one of the biggest things that we're seeing with Altar Live, but really myself kind of in my day job as a pastor, is that there is this unique yearning in the culture today. And it's, I think it was spurred on by coronavirus, and we can kind of talk about that in a minute as well. But the importance of groups has never been higher. So right now, what are you seeing in group life, in group ministry, and how's your outlook kind of changed in the last couple of years?
Well, I mean, the whole culture has changed. And, it's almost like we've advanced 10 years in the last 2 years. And, a lot of pastors were thinking, well, once we get out of the pandemic, then everything will go back to normal. Well, now that it's been 21 months, what we have is the normal. And it's very different than what we had before. And, people will worship in person and online, and not everybody is back. But what I have found is, especially related to groups, is people are choosier about who they meet with. And so they don't just want to be thrown in with a group of random people. If they're going to spend time with somebody, they're going to spend time with people that they want to spend time with, which is actually not bad, because relationships are the foundation of a group. And if you come in with relationships, I think you're better off. The other thing we found is people want flexibility. And so not only do they want it, a group whenever they want to meet or wherever they want to meet, but also however they want to meet. And so it's interesting that you have people that worship in person that would prefer to be in an online group because the online group allows them to maybe put their young children to bed and then meet with their group after their kids are asleep. But then you also have people who worship online that are not opposed to meeting with a smaller group in person.
Hmm.
But it really is a matter of how they meet, when they meet, who they meet with, um, to give people flexibility so that they can do that all in their own terms. And a lot of people have thought, well, just because the whole ministry has been discombobulated, what was working 2 years ago isn't working as well now. Well, you have a choice. You're either going to hold and watch your church decline, you're going to quit and just throw your hands up, or you're going to very quickly adapt to where the culture is. Because I'm the outsourced small group pastor for a church in Lansing, Michigan,
Okay.
and I live in Northeast Kansas. And we have grown from 29 groups at the beginning of the year currently to 83 groups,
Wow.
and in-person groups, online groups, and it's worked, but we've had to do it a little bit differently, had to offer a lot of options that maybe we hadn't thought of before. Because a lot of things, especially with online groups, before 2 years ago, online groups were a novelty. Then they became a necessity during the pandemic, and now they're really an opportunity in a lot of ways. And I go way back with this in that I did my first online group in 1994 on CompuServe. So dial-up modem, you
uh,
paid by the minute.
oh
I
yeah.
mean, this is the old days. But we actually, as a result of that group, I have a friend. We've been friends for 27 years now. He came to Christ as a result of that group.
Oh wow.
And so it's really and we have other connections with that group that we still, now we're all on Facebook, and occasionally we get together. But it's interesting that who you can meet. Obviously, there's a lot of stranger danger with the internet
Oh yeah.
anymore. However, there are also a lot of people that are connecting in a lot of ways. And it's been really cool to see churches that were local ministries become national ministries, become international ministries, and they're not necessarily, pre-COVID, they weren't necessarily large churches. It's just a matter of who they connect with and how.
Hmm. So you talk a lot about first, like the CompuServe group just blew my mind because I'm sitting here thinking. So I'm 38 right now. I was born in 1983. My dad, it was and still is, but he was a computer programmer at the time. Now he's like the VP of IT for a very large company.
Hmm.
And I remember in 1992, 1993 getting web crawler, and that was our search engine, and then having to dial in. And then I
Hmm.
remember trying to log into IRC chat with a bunch of hashtags, and I was completely over my head. How did you run a CompuServe group? What did that even look like?
There was actually a Christian forum on CompuServe. So
Hmm.
all we had was, nothing like we did now because it's dial up, right?
Yeah.
Ties up your phone line all day. We had a chat room and we had a message board.
Huh.
And that's what we were limited to. And yet in that, we could communicate well enough and often enough that we developed genuine relationships. Now,
Hmm.
the first time we met in person, it was a little awkward. In fact, the joke was that we were going to have to sit in a circle with our backs to each other
Yep.
and talk to each other over our
Oh yeah.
laptops. But the reality was we had enough gregarious personalities in the group that we overcame that very quickly. And my friend that came to Christ, this was down in Southern California. I baptized him in his jacuzzi, which is the California way.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, and we've had a great relationship ever since. But yeah, no, it was possible with very limited tools. And
Huh.
so now when you look at the number of apps, the number of ways that people could communicate online, there's no shortage. It's not the same as an in-person meeting. Um, it's different, but that doesn't mean that it's bad.
Sure. So what do your groups look like online nowadays? What's the is there a model? Is there kind of a template? What's your go-to right now?
It's a lot of variety. I mean, a lot of people are zoomed out. They're tired of Zoom. They're tired of the two-dimensional thing. They're tired of looking at themselves all day because it makes them, self-conscious. They're
Hmm.
conscious of their self, right? So groups now, some groups still meet on Zoom. Some groups will meet on other types of platforms, like they'll meet over Marco Polo and do a group asynchronously. So they're leaving a video for each other.
Right.
Or they'll be in a Facebook group, but it's the Facebook group, they're not using the video. They're just posting the questions and then responding to the questions.
Hmm.
So, and again, it's like there's not, Zoom is obviously the biggest thing. Um, because people became very familiar with it. But people are meeting in a lot of other ways. That basically, it's like you don't have, if you don't know Zoom, don't use Zoom, but use the platform that you know, with the people you know. And then the church provides guidance with, here's a curriculum to study, here's an experienced leader to coach you along. But really allowing a lot of flexibility. And again, and pastors not having to become an expert in all of these different platforms. Years ago, when I was at a church in Northern California, I had a leader that started a group on a commuter train.
Wow.
And they met every Tuesday morning going from Stockton, California to San Jose. And instead of drinking their coffee and reading their paper, they were having a Bible study.
Huh.
Now, I didn't ever dream of having a commuter train small group. I didn't get a PhD in commuter train small groups. It was just a matter of I gave permission and opportunity to my leaders, and my leader came up with this idea and she launched the group.
Huh.
So in the same way, you don't have to be an expert in Twitch or in Discord or in any other online platform. Your people are already there. So wherever they're finding community, give them something to do intentional about their spiritual growth and gather the community that they're in.
Hmm.
And this is very much the same of what I've been talking about for a very long time in people gathering their friends, their neighbors, their coworkers, other people that they know to join a group instead of just throwing people together, hoping, setting them up on a blind date, if you will, hoping that they'll like each other. But instead of that, just in the same way, on a platform with the people they know. And I look at my kids and what they do online. And my 16-year-old had kids at his birthday party that he met for the very first time, that
Wow.
they had been friends for a year because they had been playing games online together and chatting and communicating. Now they're friends both online and offline, except now we've moved 1,000 miles from where they live, and so now they're back to being online again.
Right.
But they're still connected.
It's interesting. When I was younger, this is probably 15 years ago now, 22, 23, 24, right when I first got saved, I was into the competitive scene of Halo, kind of the first person shooter on Xbox 360 at the time.
Yeah.
And I got saved and on fire for the Lord and was searching around and didn't find any community that was, doing the thing, and stumbled across a podcast. And through this podcast was kind of doing some stuff on Halo and yada, yada, yada. Anyway, I joined up with the creators of this podcast that were sitting in lobbies right before Halo matches, creating a custom game, sitting in a lobby, having an hour-long Bible study. Couldn't see them. It was not face-to-face. It was just over headphones. And then we would jump into this custom match and play Halo with each other. So we'd be studying the Lord, studying, everything about the resurrection and everything. And then for another hour, just blowing each other up. And it was some of the best community. And I still talk to 3 or 4 of those people to this day. We're friends on Facebook. We chat every so often. The lifelong, deep relationships that are being formed in a digital capacity it's astounding. And even back then, it was one of those, this doesn't feel right, but it does feel right. Like it feels like I'm not created for this, but I am created for this. And there's this weird push and pull. So how, in your consulting and kind of everything, how often are you coming up against that push and pull?
It's there a little bit just because it's hard for some people to kind of comprehend, how do you do ministry in these various situations.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the other thing too is, pastors especially get hung up in the idea of a leader. What is a
Yes.
leader?
Yes.
And so then they go to the Bible, and then the leaders they're looking for to lead a group are essentially, the qualifications for elders.
Yep.
Well, that's a little more than you need. Um, in fact, the idea is disciples make disciples. And so
Right.
years ago, I read author New York Cole. He said that we need to lower the bar on what it means to be a leader and raise the bar on what it means to be a disciple,
Hmm.
because we're all called to go and make disciples.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so without it feeling overly programmatic, to be able to give people tools, to be able to give people resources to go, meet with people that they like and they already know or they want to get to know, and to be able to, share the love of Christ in that environment. And if it's not imposing something on somebody that they're not interested in, but I mean, look at the level of anxiety in our country
Oh
right
yeah.
now. In
Oh
fact,
yeah.
I sat down with the head of curriculum for Zondervan a couple months back, and the top four no, four sellers of curriculum right now at Zondervan all have to do with anxiety.
Huh.
And so, you look at the level of anxiety, and so you think, okay, out of the people that I know, online, offline, wherever I've met them, if I offered a Bible study on anxiety and how to deal with stress, how many people do I know that might be interested in that? Now, I'm
Hmm.
not going to tell them I'm not going to bait and switch them and tell them it's something else. I'll let them know it's a Bible study or it's something from my church or whatever. But how would that happen? But see, I think that we don't think of a lot of these things in context of ministry because they seem secular, and yet the reality is that we're spiritual beings. So
Yep.
everything we do is spiritual.
Yep.
And so, can we do something intentional about spiritual growth or intentional to share the love of Christ with people? And I think wherever we find community, so it's not like the Gospels where they're in a village and they invite the fishermen or they invite whoever's local and connected and so related or however, um, but it's the same principle. It's just a different method of going about that,
Hmm.
and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong.
Hmm. I love that. Shifting gears just slightly. So we we have a product called Alter Live. It's a platform. It is kind of trying to hybridize and is hybridizing a lot of different things. It's taking the best things from Church Online platform, from Facebook and from Zoom, and kind of smashing them together and releasing it into the church wilderness and saying, here you go, we have the answer for you. Now, in our kind of our pre-show, you said that you'd had conversations with our CEO, Stephanie, who's amazing and awesome and wonderful. Tell me what kind of has drawn you to Alter Live, and through those conversations, what you've learned about the platform and the product.
I think it's interesting is, I mean, for being a startup, that it's not even 2 years old. I mean, they've adapted so quickly
Yeah.
to the needs of churches, and I think just the idea of having a hybrid worship environment where people can worship in person, people can worship online, and they can share in one common service, but it's beyond streaming. So I
Yes.
like the idea that people can walk into a lobby and they can have a conversation pre-worship just like they would if they were walking into a physical lobby, and then
Hmm.
they can go in and sit in the auditorium and participate, and then the functions for small groups and all of those sorts of things. I think that Alter Live is perfectly positioned. I mean, not just for what happened during the pandemic, but I think also now, as we're talking more and more about the metaverse.
Hmm.
Could this be the meta church, if you will, for the metaverse? Now, I'm not coining a term. Meta church goes back to Carl George in a book he wrote in the early '90s.
Yep.
But the idea of going to where people, where you can reach people, and trying to think of things in more of a missional context.
Hmm.
Now, I don't know why people will pack events. I don't know why people will pack football stadiums and they won't all show up on Sunday.
Hmm.
So you think, well, if they were worried about the pandemic, they would be worried about the pandemic everywhere. So I told somebody, I said, well, there are the group that I call COVID cautious, that they're just trying to stay away for the sake of their health. I said, there's another group, and originally I was calling them COVID lazy, and then somebody told me that was judgmental. So I changed it.
Just a
Now
little.
I call it COVID comfortable,
Okay.
and it's just easier to stay at home. And you know what? And that's not necessarily bad, because if that's where they're going to connect, but then beyond that, where is the place where they're going to get to know each other and hang out and rub off on each other, encourage each other, all of the one another's of Scripture. Where are the places that they're going to practice that? I even look at the verse that talks about encourage one another daily.
Hmm.
Well, I cannot do that physically in person. I cannot encourage one another daily. But you know what? Every adult in America is within 5 feet of a smartphone,
Amen.
and we use it all the time. So
Amen.
while I'm on the smartphone anyway, can I send somebody a little encouragement? I'm thinking about you today. I'm praying for you today. Asking them how things went, and using it, for more than just, sharing cat memes and arguing about, whatever.
Mm. Yeah, your lips to God's ears, my friend. So we have a lot of stuff going on, I guess, around us, and we have a lot that's kind of baked into the Ultra Live thing. And so you've got the mashup of groups, you've got the mashup of events, you got the mashup of the lobby. Where specifically can you envision you and perhaps allenwhite.org, and which that was a plug right there. I was just trying to get
There
that
you
in there.
go.
Where if you were using this right now, what would you be using Ultralive for?
Yeah, and this is actually something that I'm considering.
Hmm.
So I do coaching groups with groups of 8 pastors at a time, and we spend 6 months together as a group. And so what I see is the group function actually using that to meet as a group, to share information, to have conversations together. But I also do webinars,
Hmm.
and so I'm thinking in the feature where you have the large group setting, like you would use for a worship service, could also be used, as a webinar,
Hmm.
and that people have the chance, because usually when you have webinars, I'm trying to pay attention to my notes and, direct all of that, but then I'm looking at the chat and people are talking to each other. And every once in a while, I've told them to calm down. And yet, if they had a chance, to meet together in the virtual lobby before they came into the event, that would work as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very cool features, and so that's what I'm considering right now. Is Stephanie and I have been talking of how to integrate that platform into the work that I'm doing anyway.
Hmm. That's awesome. I want to again switch gears because I before we were recording, I was reciting kind of something that you had written back on November 23rd of 2021. And you put a post up, and I'll put it in the show notes of this so that everybody can kind of go check out what I'm talking about. The post is called Creating Community, and it was a blog that is essentially about, it looks like the ideas behind really how to engage a community. And it doesn't, off the top of everything, it doesn't essentially mean just digital community. And so those of you that are here for digital community, we also need to think about physical community too. But I want to read one little line. You start out by saying that community is just as essential to spiritual growth as content. Amen. Yes, and amen. I think everybody would jump on that. And the tough part is that during COVID, every single pastor, every single group leader went from being a group leader and pastor to now content creator first and pastor second. And so there's a lot of people that are just shouting from the rooftops, yes, I'm not a content creator. You said, think about this. Jesus, who designed your brain, also taught you how to make disciples. Okay. According to one study, Jesus spent 73% of his time with disciples. This involved teaching, eating, serving, debating, correcting, and sending. All of this was wrapped around community. Here's the line that really got me. While the Enlightenment hijacked the Western church's approach to disciple making, neuroscience is showing the importance of community in developing godly character. This is not a time interview that I'm doing. This is not a 60 minutes interview. But I want to dive into that real quick. What do you mean by the Enlightenment hijacking the Western church's approach to disciple making?
Yeah, a few months ago, I came across a book that's called The Other Half of Church by Jim Wilder and Michael Hendricks. And what they talk about, and Jim Wilder calls himself a neurotheologian. And so what they talk about is that when the brain reacts to something, it starts in the back of the brain, and then our reaction goes to the right side of the brain and then crosses over to the left side of the brain.
Hmm.
Now, the left side of our brain is where we typically learn things, we store knowledge. The right side of our brain is more creative. But what they found in the research was that character is developed in the right side of the brain.
Hmm.
However, the Enlightenment said that if we know the right things and we make the right choices with the left side of our brain, then, we're going to be on the right path and we're going to be reflecting godly character and all of this stuff. And I'm probably overstating this oversimplistically, and I'm still trying to get my own understanding of this. In fact, I spent 2 months with the group going through chapter by chapter of this book and getting into all of this. But what they talk about is character development being in the right side of the brain is influenced by two things. It's influenced by joy. So this idea of the God's face is shining on me, that God is for me, and then that's reflected through the second thing is a group of believers through community, or the
Hmm.
Old Testament word would be hesed.
Yeah.
That I have this group of people that's going to stick with me, and this group has values, and my character is shaped by the values associated with that group. So
Hmm.
that's why when we get into online ministry, we can't just say, oh, well, we'll just deliver all of these online courses and then people will just watch all of these online courses and then they'll have all of this content. Well, I spent the last 14 years living in the South, and there are two religions in the South: church and college football,
Football.
and
Yep.
not necessarily in that order. And so, but here's the thing: you have all these people going to church every Sunday, all these people learn all of this Bible, and this is not just the South, this is everywhere. They're very knowledgeable of God's word, and yet when it comes down to it, we do what we feel like. And so you have all of these people that, have all of this Bible content, and yet the way that they live their lives in some cases is not that much different than people who are living apart from God.
Hmm.
So what makes the difference? There's got to be more to this. And so part of it is the group that I'm in, because the group is going to, one definition of disciple is, well, certainly to follow, certainly a student, but another definition is the idea to rub off on.
Hmm.
So I need people around me that are going to rub off on me, that I'm going to begin to develop character, because this is, what the group is for, and what the group is about. Um, the way I look at it is, years ago I was at a banquet, and the speaker at the banquet said, right now I want you in your mind to think about what are five sermons that you've ever heard that have greatly impacted your life for Christ. And we're all sitting in there in the banquet going, oh my goodness, we can't even remember the sermon from last Sunday,
Yep.
let alone, So then he said, okay, let me ask you a different question. Who are five people that have greatly impacted your
Hmm.
life for Christ?
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden, we're naming them off.
Yep.
So there's something to not just the content. I mean, God gave us a book and God gave us a brain, so that's not a coincidence.
Hmm.
But also God shaped us for living in community, and so we need those people in our lives who love us but aren't impressed with us. I had a very good friend one day that he gave me such a good favor. I told him, I said, I am so worried. And I told him what I was worried about. And he looked at me in the eye and he said, Alan White, that has got to be the dumbest thing I've ever heard come out of your mouth. And I was like, thank God.
That's so good.
And thank my friend for telling me that, because we need that. Because if we're so much in our heads, then worried about things, or not sure how things are going to work out, or just even needing to talk to each other. And the Bible has pesky verses like James chapter 5
Oh
verse
yeah.
16 that
Oh yeah.
say, confess your sins to one another that you might be healed. And it's like, oh man, can I just confess to God? It's my personal relationship with God. Well, it's personal, but it's not private.
Right.
And so when I speak to groups and we get to that one another, confess your sins to one another, and it gets a little uncomfortable in the room, I said, well, if you're not ready to confess to your friend or to your small group or whoever, I said, have you ever taken an Uber?
Mm.
Call an Uber,
Mm.
confess your sins to your Uber driver. Then now you've had practice.
And they've heard much of it.
they they've heard it all,
Yeah.
and so and then go back to talk to somebody who might help you. But I think that, again, we got to get down to what are the essentials that we need. We
Hmm.
need we need content, we need community, but it's not content to the exclusion of community. It's not community to the exclusion of content. And then there also are circumstances and just the things that life brings to us, and have people that point us back to Jesus, people that encourage us, a safe place to try some of these things on, and even to occasionally just assess where we are in our growth as a believer. Because a lot of people, it's not original with me, but a lot of people, say, well, I've been a Christian for 30 years. Well, they've repeated the same 1 year of their Christian experience 30 times.
Mm-hmm.
But they haven't been, they don't have that progression of growth. But I think other believers is a big part of that, and being bold enough to spur one another on to love and good deeds, and to exhort one another, and to do all of these things. I mean, what are the things Jesus said in the Bible? He was actually serious about that. The things that we should do, the things we should say to each other, the things that we should, meddle and get involved. And I'm going to start preaching a little bit, but I think the last 30 years, the church has been so focused on getting people in the door and filling up the seats and entertaining them a little bit so that they would hear the message of the gospel and be saved, that we've
Mm.
been very reluctant to say anything that might possibly offend somebody.
Mm.
But then we're not having the impact that we could have, or maybe that we should have. And then the pandemic hits and half of them are gone.
Mm.
Well, they just found something more entertaining to watch,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So, but the ones that stayed, the congregations are half full, but giving is still steady.
Yep.
So if the giving is steady and you have half the people, then who stayed and who left, right?
Amen. Amen. Awesome. Alan, I feel like I could talk to you forever. Our time is about up here.
Okay.
I want to thank you. I want to thank you so much for joining us on the Ultra Live show. And I want to encourage everybody that is tuning in right now, live or on demand, head over to alanwhite.org. This guy has a blog that would make you blush. I have, I think, one, two, three, four. I have 5 blog tabs open on my monitor over here. One of them that I would love to talk to you about again, what McUltra understands about community. And it's all about CrossFit. I do CrossFit. I actually had a nonprofit CrossFit gym for a faith-based nonprofit CrossFit gym right when you wrote this article. And I remember reading this article and just going like, this guy gets it. So,
And even the guy that was the president of CrossFit
yep,
said that people come for the fit and stay for the family.
exactly. And
So, which
that's
is a little better than the going back to the Cheers theme song like we used to.
it.
So,
Yes and no. That Cheers theme song might be a little more memorable than, hey, do 15,000 thrusters and row 10,000 calories for time. That type
there you
of thing.
go.
So,
There you
Alan,
go.
thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thank you.
Absolutely. We'll talk to you guys later.